Hi, everyone. I have to say that the latest or the last startup that was advertised here caught my attention the most, because these are the problems I can actually feel in my heart, and in our business. Everything that has to do with urban planning and, especially us ex-Soviet countries here, and how our cities are being planned and how car-oriented we are and how motorized our cities are. So that's why when Bolt was launched already in 2013, the idea was to reduce dependency on personal cars and actually to use more shared assets. So this was back then, and now fast forward to 2021, and Bolt really tries to figure out how to reduce inherently our carbon footprint. Because you can imagine that even though Bolt doesn't own any cars, we're in 40 countries, and that's kind of crazy if you think about what's the carbon footprint of all of the rides that we facilitate. So that's why I'm working as the head of sustainability at Bolt. Hope it's a familiar company for you in Lithuania. Unfortunately, maybe not so familiar to you in Singapore, but we'll get there. So I'm very much looking forward to have this chat with you, and the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks, Sandra, and thanks everyone for being here, and thanks to the ROCKIT team for inviting me again. So I'm Simon. I am a academic turned entrepreneur. I've got my company now, Handprint, which is a positive impact platform that helps companies integrate various types of positive impact, from mangrove reforestation, as some companies are doing as well, but to any type of positive impact that aligns with the 17 sustainable development goals. And we integrate that into business processes and kind of connect those contributions to good causes to key performance indicators of companies. So that's what we do. And I also have a non-profit organization that specifically works on mangrove reforestation, and really happy to be here and to be invited. So I think there's a big scale difference in terms of the company Sandra is working for and the company that I founded. So we are in the early stages, have just raised our first seed round, went from 3 to 14 people. You're of course now working in already a multinational, 40 countries. But let me just ask you, because I don't like interviews where the questions are too simple, so I'm only going to ask you difficult questions, and I absolutely encourage you to do the same. So is private transportation, or everyone's private driver, to go back to Uber's old adagio, is it even possible to be sustainable?
Okay, that's indeed a tricky question. Well, I'm not going to lie to you, it's super difficult in a way that I mentioned. Bolt has 1.5 million drivers in the 200 cities that we operate. And, you can imagine how many rides those 1.5 million drivers do. And I mean, it's 2021, but still we talk about ICE cars, so internal combustion engine cars. There are not too many EVs out there to battery price, etc. So, of course, in an ideal world, to go sustainable, it would mean that we offer those transportation systems or intermediate those transport systems with sustainable vehicles, electric cars, hybrid cars. But the fact is, if you think about a country like Estonia, so Estonia, Tallinn has 400,000 people. Tallinn has 300,000 cars. Can you imagine that? And but altogether in Estonia, we have only 1,700 electric cars. So it's clear that if we want to offer the service, we cannot actually do it solely with electric cars, because that's for the entire population of Estonia. And on our platform, we maybe have like 50 electric cars. So it's kind of tricky. So, but how do you then go sustainable? And this is what we try to figure out. And that's why Bolt came out with the e-scooter solution, or e-scooter service. Like, I believe us as companies, as transportation companies, can be sustainable if we figure out ways how to offer more sustainable transportation methods. Electric cars instead of ICEs. As long as electric cars are not available, let's go to micromobility, because cars themselves are not going to fix the problem. A problem of urban planning, problem of people moving around in the city, problem of a car sitting somewhere in a parking lot for 95% of the time, and it's only being used 5% of the time. So it's difficult, but we're trying to get there.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. I think it is true. It is extremely challenging. And just to maybe add on to that, so it's because we all use this word sustainable, of course, and obviously as part of this accelerator, this is what everything is about. Like, what is sustainability for you? Like, when is something sustainable?
Well, it's also a tricky question. As you know, there's a lot of greenwashing out there, right? Which is something I definitely want to talk to you about later on. But for me, going sustainable is actually not compromising with the natural resources and the planet that we have at the expense of offering your own business service. So, you know, whatever it is, making fizzy drinks to, I don't know, manufacturing houses or offering a transportation service. If your service comes at the expense of someone else's resources, then it's not sustainable. So I guess, like, by and large, we can think of sustainability such as this one.
Yeah.
Okay, but you've got two questions from me already, so I'm going to ask questions from you now. So the company Handprint, it's such a cool name, but you know, you immediately want to think about footprint. So what is Handprint if it's not footprint? Would you care to explain a bit?
Sure. So for us, the choice of naming the company Handprint was very deliberate. So in the kind of eco community, Handprint is sometimes used to denote the sum of positive impact, whereas footprint is almost what you do by default. And unfortunately, what we do by default, because of our industrial ecological system, is typically not very good for the planet. And so what Handprint is kind of the sum of all the positive actions you take deliberately in order to make a positive change in the world. And as a company name and as a vision, we found this to be very aspirational. So one of the things that we realized, and so also me in my academic research in the past, is that we've been having this conversation about carbon footprinting for a very long time. And this is definitely not an attack on the guys from Earthbank, because I think what you guys are doing is awesome and it looks really, really cool. But the conversation that focuses on footprinting is a conversation that focuses on historical guilt and trying to potentially buy kind of indulgences for your sins, to talk in a kind of Catholic frame of mind. And the problem with that conversation for me is that it's not aspirational. If the highest goal that you can achieve is zero, you're going to find it very hard to motivate a large group of people to aspire to that goal of zero, to aspire to that goal of neutrality. And as a consequence, we wanted to really change the language and focus the conversation completely on the positive side, on the handprint, on what you can do deliberately to do good. And one of the main advantages I think we have with this narrative and with this vision is that it's way more inclusive, right? Bolt is now a big company, and you guys have the talent, the skills, the resources to measure your carbon footprint, to map all these things. You may be able to hire consultants to do all this work, and potentially you're big enough to move systems at an institutional level, right? If you're a small SME and you want to do, let's say you're a small SME in Singapore and you want to be green or greener, well, the first thing you would think about is, okay, I'm going to buy green energy. Good luck. Does not exist in Singapore, right? Or I'm going to try to convince my supply chain to use recycled plastics or something. But you need market power. You need size to be able to really make those changes. And so what I think is interesting about Handprint is, look, everyone can do it, from an individual, from a 5-year-old kid to an SME to potentially a very big organization. Everyone can say, I'm going to do something deliberate that is good. And you don't need massive scale for that. Because if we bring scale and if we bring aggregation of all these positive impacts, then every little truly helps.
Okay, but now I'm going to be a bit pessimistic and ask you, like, if you focus only on being positive and leaving this positive handprint, and I'm going to use that definitely, I hope it's going to become the Google of searching things, you know, leaving a handprint. Don't you think maybe people set aside the negative aspects and you know, there's a threat of going on and doing greenwashing and stuff like this? Or how do you feel about this one?
I mean, it is a risk. I think there are many different ways to look at that. One is that we've been spending a lot of time already the last 30 years. And of course, every year it's more and more talking about footprints, and we haven't really solved any of the real problems we're facing. So potentially that focus on negativity and the negative things isn't really driving massive inspiration, isn't really driving massive innovation. Secondly, like I've done some research on this, and I'm actually in favor of greenwashing. And this is controversial, but the reason why I think greenwashing is a good thing is not because I like it that companies lie and get away with it. It's because I believe that there is currently so much attention, especially to bigger organizations, but increasingly to smaller organizations as well, to what they're doing, that if they start making claims that aren't backed by science, by solid verification, they're going to be held accountable, they're going to be exposed. And typically what happens when such accountability inevitably occurs is that, well, so first they were just talking the talk, and then they said, okay, well, now we got caught red-handed. Maybe we're also going to start walking the walk. And so in that way, I think the fact that greenwashing is almost a necessity if you're an evil company, let's say, is actually a good sign. It just means that there is so much institutional and social pressure on companies to be green, that if they can't really be green, well, at least they're going to pretend. And so it does enhance our awareness of it. It creates visibility. And so in that way, I think, yes, there is a positive side to it. Now, do I encourage it? No. And when we have conversations with clients, we do want them to start with minimizing emissions, reducing their footprint, thinking about their impact on land, water, other kind of aspects. And we want to have that conversation with them as well. But I think we prefer to have the positive conversation. And if companies then make claims about, okay, we are now, whatever, 10 times climate positive, awesome, that's good. And if people don't believe it, then fine, they can be held accountable. But there is also a business, let's say there's a business risk reduction for us in not being involved with the footprinting side. Because if we're involved with that side as well, then we're going to be held accountable for claims that companies make. If we are only involved with the positive side, we can absolutely guarantee this is a positive impact this company is having. We're monitoring this, we're tracking this, we're providing all this data. That's great. If you want to make claims about being climate neutral, that's up to you. And so there is a kind of self-preservation as well as a company. You have to fight your battles. You can't do everything. So yeah, I think that's how we see that. But it may not be the right approach, right? We're still small, and but,
no, I agree.
But we do see. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I like how you said that greenwashing actually has a positive impact, and because it creates more fuss around this. And my worry is, and what I see also with startups in Estonia, with whom we actually founded something known as the Tech Green Pledge, is that many companies actually even don't start going sustainable because they're so afraid of being labeled as doing greenwashing. So for some, it seems safer to sit in the sidelines and look at what others are doing, and then they don't get pointed at as saying that, oh guys, you are doing greenwashing, because they're actually doing nothing. So for some, it seems safer to do nothing as opposed to do something and be labeled as greenwashers. So
that's true.
That's a big problem. Yeah.
No, I think that is a very big problem. And a lot of that has to do, I think, with lack of knowledge, lack of time, lack of awareness in terms of where to start. So just to give you an example, over the weekend, a friend of mine who works for a big shipping company, right? This is a very polluting industry, approached me and said, I've been talking to my boss about your company. He really wants to meet because we have to do sustainability, right? That's how it kind of starts. It's not value driven for many companies. We have to do sustainability. It's like, okay, cool. Let's have a conversation. Yes, but do you know a place where we can buy recycled paper? And I'm like, well, okay, but this is what people do because there is no awareness. And they're like, well, this is not what you should be focusing on. You're in shipping. Mm-hmm. The last thing you should focus on is buying your paper recycled. It's, of course, a good thing, but this is not where your environmental impact is. So, and I think what is really the challenge for many companies that are kind of sitting on the sidelines is like, well, either we're afraid of being labeled as greenwashing, so we rather do nothing. Yes. So I think a company like Handprint says like, fine, you can just do something good and you can communicate about that, and at least it's going to be trustworthy. because you have this external party that verifies all of those things. And so for many companies, it could also just be a first step into this journey. And then over time, hopefully they'll do something more substantial that also involves reduction and all of those kind of things. And I think still for so many companies, and then again, you guys are in Europe. I've been in Singapore now for the past 6 years. Like, Asia is decades behind Europe. Like, I mean, you can't even imagine how uneducated people are here, even in Singapore, right? Where this is a very vibrant and a very affluent cosmopolitan city. But if you think about like waste recycling, plastic bags, all of those things, it's completely alien to the population here. So we really start from a different vantage point. And as a consequence, we need to go a lot further. Now, on the other hand, Singapore is one of the greenest cities in the world. Despite its incredible dense population, it has still 53% of greenery of the land mass. They have incredibly good public transport, increasingly moving towards sustainable and like electrification and all of those things. So that is then, I think, a very good point. But with Bolt, to what extent is this part of your vision as an organization, right? Do you define yourself as a mobility company? Do you define yourself as a rent a car, or is it more like, no, we are in this business of creating transport solutions for cities? And how does that work for you guys?
Yeah, so for us, we're a bit lucky in a way that, you know, our CEO was 19 at the time when he started this company. So now he's 26. And this means also his mindset is a bit different, you know, not complaining that people who are older don't care about the environment, but, you know, especially us in the Central and in Eastern European countries, you know, when we grew up, we didn't think about the environment. You know, we built the Rusztovkas, or like big apartment buildings, which were meant to last for maximum 10 years. And now they've been there for, you know, more than 5 decades, more than half a century already. And so us at Bolt, you can say that sustainability is like integrated into the business vision. However, it's not also butterflies and flowers and everything so nice, because we have 2,000 people working at Bolt. And Bolt is a startup. We're a scale-up now. And still, whenever you go with an idea to someone, they ask, okay, what's my immediate ROI? What's my immediate return on investment? What do I get out of this business-wise? And with sustainability, you know, that's still, this is something known as the operational principle we call short-term pessimism, long-term optimism, in a way that you might think that we cannot make a difference, or, you know, we don't understand what, from business perspective, what's the immediate ROI, you know, or from the planet's perspective, what's the immediate ROI. And then it's a bit difficult, and you have to shake some people, and you have to let them know that, you know, this is the inherent vision of this company, is to be sustainable. But still, not all of the people get that. But, you know, from the big perspective, yes, as you mentioned, we are meant to be the urban transportation disruptors, in a way that Bolt was the first transportation platform who had not only ride-hailing, but then also e-scooters, and then also e-bikes, and now also food on exactly the same platform. So what we offer already should serve as a go-to platform for people if they want to move around in the cities, in a way that, you know, this is my route. I need to get from A to B. What do I do? You know, take first stop with an e-scooter, then jump on the public transportation bus, then take the last mile on foot, or if it's too long, take it with ride-hailing car. So we see ourselves as not offering only one service and one urban mobility option, but rather bringing together different modes of transport and offering them in the most sustainable way, because we can also influence the user behavior within our app. So we started testing how do we get people from ride-hailing, which is our core service, to e-scooters actually. And you know, my hometown, which is the summer resort of Estonia, it's called Pärnu. We saw like 30% of leap from people from ride-hailing to e-scooters over the summer months, just because we made them available, we made them accessible. We talked about the service being available, so we see that already within our services we can go more sustainable as well. So I would say for sure, like, sustainability is what we live and breathe.
It's very interesting because I mean, you obviously recently got a massive round of investment. I think that's public knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So how, for as far as you already know, because it's quite recent, but so how do you think Bolt's kind of nature, its DNA might be affected by now having this big Chinese investor that may not really care about the sustainability angle, especially if you're giving examples like, oh, we're actually trying to go from a ride-hailing, potentially high profit use case within our platform to a lower impact, but potentially also lower profit use case. Like, how are you dealing with these trade-offs?
Well, they're not trade-offs really, because I think all of the investors, they see the need for sustainability. And I think Bolt has really set the tone in a way that our co-founder, who's one of the two founding brothers, Martin Willig, has been named as the VP of Sustainability of Bolt as well. So if already at this level, you have dedication, and I'm the head of sustainability, you know, we have a dedicated team, we have dedicated funding, etc. Then due to any new investors, we're not going to step back. But can I still ask a few questions from you as well?
Please do.
Yeah. So how do you prioritize your market segments, thinking you do what you do? Isn't it kind of tricky, or how does this work?
I mean, I think it is the quintessential problem of every startup, right? And the honest answer is, like, I have no idea. So, because we set up Handprint with the idea to build an e-commerce integration, and so we have that now. So Shopify users, WooCommerce users can integrate Handprint in a few clicks and can start connecting their checkout sales to online to positive causes, to positive impact causes. And that's interesting because if you look at e-commerce in general, obviously it's skyrocketed during the COVID crisis, but also it's created, it's an industry in which 80% of purchases are stuck in the cart. And so very often people are selecting a bunch of things and end up not buying them, especially for slightly pricier goods. And so if Handprint as a reminder that shows up at the e-commerce at the moment of checkout already can say, like, okay, maybe it might incentivize 1% of people to say, oh, well, I was going to wait for a week, or I was potentially not sure, but now they're doing this good thing, I might as well buy it, right? That's a massive game changer. And so we are working with the university and with some of our early stage clients to actually test whether this is true. That's going to be really interesting for us to see. But the challenge beyond e-commerce integration is that we are being approached by very different industries. So in the last 2 weeks, we've been talking with a competitor of yours in Asia. We've been talking to advertising companies. Because they want to be able to integrate, for instance, reforestation projects into marketing campaigns, into impressions. We've been talking with hotels. We've been talking with banks. We've been talking with data providers. So the scope is very, very broad. And as a consequence, how we're going to focus and how we're going to allocate our resources is, I think, a key challenge. And I'm sure other startups have experienced the same thing. We are still really in the experimentation phase there. We have our first 2 products, so we have a go-to market. This is the focus. We are building a consumer product as well. But we really haven't figured that out. So any advice from the audience or from the other, especially from the other people that are joining this the accelerator, would be very welcome. Maybe it's a luxury problem to have a lot of different markets, but it does make it very complex. And maybe kind of flipping that question around to you is also like, you guys operate in so many different markets, but I'm sure there are very big differences in the needs of this market, what is possible there. We were talking earlier before the call saying, like, oh yeah, we can't go to Germany because of barriers to entry. So how do you approach different markets as Bolt? Do you have a standard template? Are you like moving fast and breaking things like Uber, or do you have a different way of going into a market?
No, actually, we have and it's a really good question because we do have a super tailor-made approach to all of the markets. And this is something we're really proud of. And this is something how we differentiate ourselves from our competitors. Like, we're very local oriented. Actually, when Bolt first started launching markets in Africa, we didn't have the money to send teams over to Africa. So what we did was we recruited over Skype. We recruited local teams to tell us what are local problems and how to solve them in a local manner, right? And this mindset has prevailed throughout all these years that Bolt has been operating. Whenever we launch a new country, a new market, we hire locally, we research what are the local problems and how to solve them in a way that would appeal to the local customers. And I think this is absolutely crucial, like to figure out what are the local needs. I mean, and it's not only between African markets and European markets, like something that's relevant in Stockholm is not necessarily relevant in Bucharest or even Tallinn, not to mention Lagos, So tailor-made approach is crucial.
And is that approach, is that kind of also present in the way you're approaching your like positive impact projects? You have these climate positive scooters. And so are they also like supporting then very local projects? And if so, isn't there a massive opportunity cost of doing that in terms of efficiency of carbon sequestration, in terms of money allocation? Like, how do you rhyme those two conflicting needs?
So what we do, to be like completely honest with you, so currently when Bolt started offsetting our rides, all of our rides are carbon neutral in European markets, because when we started it, we saw that this is not necessarily a prerequisite or of getting a service in many of the African markets who maybe prioritize safety first. So what we did, we chose the project with which we offset our rides in the African markets. So we offset the rides in Europe, but the projects we choose in Africa, whether it's building water infrastructure, financing the building of wind turbines or solar energy, etc. So the projects are normally there in Africa. But these are the wide scale projects. But otherwise, we try to do one local project in all of the markets where we operate. It doesn't have to be like a huge project. It could be something local, like building something locally, building a school even, or then solar panels on top of that school then, or just planting trees, like a couple of thousand trees locally. So we try to, and then we also figure out with the local teams, what are the things that matter the most in this community? And then we do those local projects. And I think that's crucial.
Yeah.
So how are we doing with time? I do have one life-changing question.
Oh, I think we always have time for a life-changing question.
No, I was just wondering earlier, you mentioned that Singapore is light years away in some matters from, let's say, Western European markets. Like a question, do you believe regulation is a key? Oh, because I actually worked before in the public sector for the Estonian government, and then we all believed that everything should be tech neutral, let's not over-regulate. And then I came to the tech sector, and we actually call some of the regulation to be put on us, and for matters such as sustainability. Do you think regulation is something that could help us and help the world go more sustainable? What do you think?
I mean, if you live in Singapore and if you don't like rules, then you shouldn't live in Singapore. I think it's one of the most regulated markets in many aspects in the world. It's a very tightly controlled population. It's very rule-based. Somewhat still of a semi-planned economy, but it's just done right because people in the government are the best paid people in the entire country. So you get extremely smart and extremely talented people in government. But I think in general, we need more when it comes to climate specifically, but not only climate change, but also thinking around like biodiversity support and these things. We probably need more global regulation. The problem is we don't have a global governance system that has any teeth. And the UN doesn't really do this. World Bank and the IMF can kind of support, but I think that in order to achieve what we need to achieve, that scientists are telling us that we need to achieve in terms of carbon reduction, a pure reliance on voluntary initiatives is probably not going to cut it. I would say we need to go further, and it's almost baffling that this doesn't happen. It's almost proof of like how dysfunctional political systems are that they can't make these short-term sacrifices for the long-term good for the future generations. And it's especially democracies that are unable to do so, because they elect, in some countries like in the US, they just elect idiots that then spend 4 years ruining it for everyone. Or they but that's still like, even like in my country, Belgium, where we always have like governments for a couple of weeks and then we have 500 days of negotiation about the next government. So it's impossible to make long-term policy if your real-time horizon is the next election, right? And I think this is a key challenge, and that's why I think we need more regulation, but we need almost very enlightened regulation that comes from, maybe not from policymakers, but from other people. And I'm hoping that like civil society and younger people like Greta Thunberg and that are leading this movement of young kids that are becoming powerful voices in this, that they might move the needle. And of course, some of them have already moved the needle, but I think we will still need regulation. I'm just not sure if the regulation is going to come from the existing political system. Maybe it might have to come from just, self-regulation from companies. But then how do you deal with free riders? I don't know.
Yeah.
How do you guys deal with free riders? And in Bolt, that must be a big.
No, we were once those, so it's, what can you do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I may then ask the one last question, they haven't told us to shut up yet. Then
But
what's
we're about to do so. But one last question. But one last question, and we can afford. So please shoot.
Okay. Simon, what's in it for you in the next coming year with Handprint? If it's not a big secret.
Gosh. I mean, we're raising funds. That's definitely going to be an exciting part. We are hoping to grow our e-commerce platform from where we are now to maybe 2,000 to 5,000 users, and then have some bespoke implementations for some of the big organizations we're talking to. Can't name names given NDA requirements, but it's looking very exciting. We're hoping to grow our team from where we are now, 14 to 25, 30 by the end of the year. And and then we'll see. What about Bolt?
Well, we plan to expand to 14 more countries this year, so behold.
Okay, that's also very exciting.